Hi, everyone. If we haven't met, my name is Jordan. I'm one of the pastors here, and we are in our final week on a series titled Why Church. So we've invited some friends to help facilitate that, and we'll get to you in just a moment. So just wait, Chip, not your moment. Last week, I wasn't here in this gathering, but I was with a different gathering called Passion Church, which is in a church plant in Mount Pleasant. I got there early. I was speaking at the service, and so I kind of wandered around Mount Pleasant, and it's kind of up in this sort of studio loft. It's really cool, really trendy. Anyways, and so as you wait before the service starts, I was just killing time, and so I started to meet some of the people that were part of this community. And what fascinated me was that every individual had like a different story of how they got there. Church was a common theme for all of us, so it was a natural question of like, hey, how did you get connected with Passion Church? And all of the different stories of how people arrived there and the different moments of the story, and some heartache and some joy and some setbacks, and sometimes God did something completely different in their life. I just was really fascinated about that and how when we gathered together and then we sang and as we corporately spent time together as a community in church that morning, I was like, wow, what a diverse group of people. What a diverse group of stories. And I think one of the strongest arguments for church is you. It's your story. It's how you got here. It's how you wrestle with your faith. It's how you do all the things of Jesus and still are here today, part of a community like this. And so rather than just hearing from the paid professional Christians every week of why church is important, we thought we would get some different voices involved in this series. And so today we have a panel on why church, and I would like to say there's a lot of structure to this next 33 minutes, but we're kind of just doing it as we go here. So we try new things here around at Forest City, and so if this is terrible, it will be the last time we do it, but no pressure. It should be great. But let me take a moment and introduce who I have here. This is Chip. Chip is co-manager of Van City Bank just down here on Kingsway, and he'll have his card at the end. Just kidding. I'm just joking. But Chip's been a part of our church near almost the very beginning. I think you were here on Launch Sunday, and then you just kind of figuring that out, and him and his wife Sands and their 3 kids have been an integral part of Forest City. Next we have Bella. Bella is finishing up her master's in family therapy. Yeah, I'm gonna make up the bios for you guys, so if that's not that. And Bella and Noah, Noah is a worship lead, and they arrived about a month before we launched, and they've just been integral parts of our community. And last but not least, this is Riley. Riley's been here for about a year and a half. He's the resident supervisor, one of them. I said I'm making it up. Trinity Western University, which is just down here in Langley, where he's like mentoring and just coaching and helping students, also making sure no one burns down the campus. So that's kind of what he does on a week-to-week basis. But they're all involved in different leadership and different aspects of our church. And we want to take some time for them to just have an open conversation about church and those. And so I got my clipboard. We got our chairs. We all got mics. So why don't we start off with like maybe just letting everyone know how you got involved in church. What was your story? Briefly, but how did church become part of your story? Chip, we'll start with you.
I became a believer in my teen years in high school through the ministry of some friends who were believers, and they reached out to me and they shared their faith with me. I didn't grow up in the church. I started regularly attending church after high school when my parents felt, okay, you're old enough to make your own decisions, and so you can start going to church. I was very heavily involved in campus ministries at that time, coming out of university, and then a lot of different churches over the decades, actually. So we've actually been part of like a lot of sort of larger mainstream sort of churches, and for some funny reason, a lot of church plants. This is our 4th church plant. So, and Sans grew up in the church, so we've had a lot of sort of experiences. Yeah.
I did grow up in the church, so I can't remember a time when I wasn't going to church. My dad was actually a pastor growing up, and so our family was always very involved in the church. And yeah, I just have so many memories of like, even after services for hours, just like finding things to do in the church and hanging out. And it's just, yeah, it's been my whole life. And as I got older, my like family kind of transitioned, and I just, decided that I valued church and valued my faith and wanted to stay in church. And so I kind of, at that point, made my faith my own and have, stayed connected throughout my life.
Yeah, so good. Last, Riley.
I grew up as a pastor's kid as well. My mom's a pastor, and so I spent a lot of time in church. There was one year, I think it was about grade 7, the school I went to was also in my church, and I spent more time in that building than my own home. So church has been kind of my whole life, and then for some crazy plan, I wanted to keep doing it. I enjoyed it. I went to Bible school, and I feel like church has always been pretty integral. But when I moved out to BC, that was kind of the year that I really had to decide if faith and church was something that I wanted a part of my life. And I think that was like the formative year that made me really make it my own.
So each of you in different ways have been part of church for a long time now. But I know that each of you also have your moments of joy and celebration within church, but also you have moments of hurt and pain as a result of church as well. And so we want to have an honest conversation around church, and we just don't want to speak about all of the positive things and all the amazing things, but we also want to give some space to talk through some of the complexities and sometimes the tension that when groups of people gather together naturally happens. And so I know each of you are thoughtful and you're sincere and you've worked through it and you've processed some of those things. So I want to just give some space and maybe talk a little bit about maybe what was some of the challenge or the hurt for you at different times in your church story, and something that you had to wrestle through or process that allows you to continue to be part of a place like this. Riley, let's start with you.
Perfect. I think the one that like jumps out that has been a theme throughout my life, being like a pastor's kid, being in the church, understanding it, I was always like, just like a workhorse. Every church I went to, every environment I was a part of, I felt like I just kept serving and working, and there wasn't necessarily that much relationship. Like I don't think I would consider I didn't have a pastoral figure actually in my life except for my parents growing up. Everyone that was like supposed to be my pastor, it was just, I worked for them is kind of what it felt like. And then there was a year that I was interning at a church. I think this was in grade 10 or grade 11. And it was like a really destructive year when I interned. It was a tough summer where I just felt like taken advantage of, and I was getting to do all this work, and no one was really building relationship. And at one point, I think I finished for like my 4 months. The hours I finished in 2 months. And it was just, it was a tough summer, and I think that was an area that I really had to restore before the Lord. There was a season of my life where I went to church, and this is, maybe don't do this, but my goal was to like not talk to anyone, hide in the back, and get out as soon as church ended, because I had to remind myself, like, what is the church? Like, what actually is important about the church? And ultimately, if we don't have Jesus, there's no point in meeting within the church. And so that had to like really be healed and restored in my life, and kind of learning then the balance of there is joy in serving, there's community in serving. This is an opportunity to come together and work together and show how much we believe Jesus is alive and moving. But I never had that perspective growing up. It was just, I do what I have to do, I serve, can't be a burden, get in, get out kind of idea.
Yeah, and I think that's a common theme for many, is the idea that you can give your whole to a church, and then on the other side of that, you can experience burnout and exhaustion. Bella, talk to us a little bit about this tension and what you feel comfortable around that.
Yeah, I can I'm sure many of us in the room have experienced church hurt, and I'm aware that those hurts can live in our body, and that even now as it comes up, many of us might just feel it in our nervous system and need to take a deep breath. And there's so much room for that, and I love that about this church, is that there's so much room that you can come with your diverse stories of yeah, in my life, I think like various church communities that we've been a part of, I feel like there wasn't really one without complexities and without hurt. And yeah, even like I just think of like times of like pastoral transitions or yeah, like certain people in the church perspectives being different than others, and that can sometimes be hard. One I think of is my family. I grew up in Alberta, and so we had lived in Alberta. And when we moved out to BC for my dad's work, we started going to a church, and we had been involved in these small churches our whole lives. Everyone knew our family. My dad was a pastor. Everyone knew. We were so involved, and we started going to this church in Abbotsford, and we would go like week after week, and people would still say like, "Oh, are you new here?" And it was just so different, and it just wasn't like a connected feeling. And I remember like that my parents were like going through a really hard time in their marriage, and there was no support from the church at that time. And I think like when our family needed it the most, we were involved in a community where that wasn't there. And there was so many people in that church that it was really healthy community for them, but us coming in just weren't met with that. And I think that, yeah, that was really hard. And I think back to those times, and I wonder, like, yeah, and some people in my family have walked away from the church altogether. And I just wonder, like, what would be different in their lives if that wasn't how it went, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Bella. I think just appreciate the vulnerability of that story, and I think that what if, those questions, and we all have friends who've experienced things like that, and can't shake that, and that's framed their view of not only places like this, but also to frame their view of who Jesus is, and I think that's important to give space to that. Chip, you maybe have been going to church more than the rest of us. So you got anything comes to mind as we talk through like some of the tensions and hurt, and you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think the church is really a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? God, Christ, died for his bride, the church, this body. I think there's so many wonderful things, and the world needs the church, right? The bride of Christ is the light, the salts. And I think my hope is that I know God is faithful, God is good, he's true, and he promises that he's going to, he's faithful to complete the work that he started in all of us, and all of us together, every believer, every child of God is the church together. For Asantha and I, sort of, for me, I didn't grow up in the church, so I had to learn a lot. And my first experience at church was actually through, it was like a predominantly Chinese church. It was an ethnic church. And that comes with its own sort of trappings. There's good and bad, right? In all this conversation, there's going to be joy and there's going to be sorrow. Immense joy. Like, we've been part of incredible movements of God in our time. But we've also experienced a lot of hurt, abuse, and not just in our own experience, but people we love, right, who have gone through it. Things from like politics, staffing, at some levels, at very real levels. When it comes to work or ministry or even abuse, things that sort of happen. At times it feels like there's actually no difference between what happens in secular environments, secular communities, at work, and at church, right? I feel what's so special about being in community is that we are called to bear with one another, to forgive one another, and we do operate differently from the way the world does because we are in Christ. And so, there's a lot here, and I know we don't know obviously your stories, but just know that your story really matters. God knows your story, and we can actually speak into your story if you're willing to share it. And we can actually work all of this out, the pain, and really it's a form of suffering, right? we can actually carry each other's burdens, because where we are now is not where we're always going to be. And your experience, whatever you've gone through, that's not the end of the story, right? So I think when we talk about this, there is that intermingling of that joy and sorrow. We're not blind, we're not naive anymore to what's happened and what happens today, what's still happening today. But we're also, it's just as real that we are someday going to be completely perfect before God, absolutely whole, radiant, beautiful. And yeah, it's going to be wonderful, right? And we get to experience some of that even now.
That's great. I think what's really important about the theme of the conversation is I know very few followers of Jesus who have been following him for a long time who have not wrestled with some of these things, and who don't continue to wrestle with being in close relationship with other human beings. I remember I came with a friend once to a church service, and he wasn't a churchgoer. He had a lot of skepticism, criticism around church. And I remember us afterward at a restaurant, and the way he was describing church was he's describing a group of people that just were blindly following what was happening in this space. And there was an assumption that individuals like we've heard today haven't wrestled or haven't had experiences of tension and hurt and frustration and injustice. And so I think that's just important to know that on a side that many of the individuals that call church home or part of a community have wrestled and continue to wrestle with that. And maybe you're here today and you're wrestling with pieces of that. And this is a safe place for you to wrestle with that. I don't think it serves the church or to us to ignore it or pretend it doesn't happen, but to acknowledge those things of injustice. That's how we started this series around church. So I think that's important. I think that's a side. But you're all here, and you're all part of church, even though you all have your stories of frustration and hurt, and sometimes rightfully so. Sometimes there has been injustice, and you've unfortunately experienced that. So why are you here? Why are you part of church? Why haven't you been maybe some of your friends, your family who've walked away? Your golf game could really improve, Your fantasy football teams could get better. There's other things you could do on Sunday, or come out to a small group midweek or serve and give. Surely you could devote that time and energy and resources to other things. So why have you continued to decide to be part of a community? I'll let any of you. If none of you get it, we'll just move on to the next question, and this is really not going to work well. But
No, I can go. I kind of see it in two parts. I think, firstly, the Lord is a redemptive God, and I think that has brought so much hope into my life within the church of how I was reading this book. I think it's Live No Lies, John Mark Comer. Fact check? Yep, Bella said yes, we're good. Live No Lies, John Mark Comer. And in it, he talks about humanity as a cycle and how we always think we are the best version, most powerful, most intelligent version that has ever existed. But really, we see all the same problems. They just maybe sound a little different. The core is always the same. And as I was reading that, I was reminded that no matter what we face, no matter what feels new and big to us, and that's not to belittle the emotion or belittle what we're going through, but it's that assurance that for God, this isn't new. And throughout history, we see that God continues to redeem people. Throughout Scripture, we see that God continues to redeem people. And how he always is saying, I think it's Isaiah 43, he's saying, look, I'm doing a new work. I'm doing something new. And I really believe that there's hope within the church because our God redeems. And I've seen it in my own life. And so then how much more would he do it for the bride? That is kind of what brings hope. I think the other part, growing up, a big gap I saw within the church is that we glorified stereotypes. And we said, this is what a Christian looks like. And for me, it was always a Christian guy, plays sports. Maybe if he's on the worship team, he's always playing an instrument, can't sing by himself. And it was very specific how it looked. And I just felt our God is too much of a creator to say that there's only one stereotypical way to live life. Yes, same values, stick to Scripture, come on, amen, hallelujah. But I felt that our God is so creative and so vast that I believe the church is diverse and beautiful, and we need different perspectives. And so where I felt that frustration, I really did feel like, okay, I believe God is going to redeem this and bring in communities that so beautifully show his creation and his love and the way that he values all people. And so I think those are two that like come back to me, the moments where I'm like, oh, I'm ready to quit, I'm ready to be done. I remind myself of his redemptive nature and his creative nature.
That's very good, Riley. Chip, for you, like how have you, this is your 4th church plant. Wow, I didn't know that. We should have talked about that. Anyways, so why did you decide to get involved in a crazy church plant again? Like for you, and like even if you could speak a little bit, because you have kids, and why it's important for your family and the formation of this community with like your children, why that's really, like that's important to you as well. You want to speak a little bit into that?
Sans and I have been blessed with 3 beautiful, wonderful children, and they're such a gift, right? And sort of even the story of us having those 3 is pretty cool. Casey's a bit of a miracle baby, and Jonathan was a total surprise. And Elliot, I prayed for after Sans said we were done. I said, I respect that, but I just want to let you know. I did talk to God about it, and I really would love another child. And she was like, Chip,
you dropped
seriously,
you dropped the God card.
Come on. That was her she was supposed to go back to school, like with Jonathan, and then Jonathan came, right? And then she couldn't, and then she was like, no, I'm going to go back to school, and then Elliot came. Anyways, all of that to say, it's not a song that's going to change the world. It's not a sermon that's going to change the world. Discipleship can change the world. And so Sans and I, we're tasked, and this is an incredible honor to raise our children to know and love and actually to receive God's love. That's actually probably the most important thing that we can teach our children, is to learn to receive God's love, right? So we really want them to experience God's love, because otherwise it's just what we talk a lot about, right? And they're kind of immersed in it. So different from my experience growing up, they've grown up in the church. And so we were going to see things differently. We're going to feel things differently. For me, church was such a magical experience, like worship and learning about God through the Bible, right? For them, it's kind of different. So when it came to finding sort of a church, and really it's God has led us here. It is our 4th church plant. I think when it comes, what we really value is missional communities, right? So being part of a church plant, it's, there's a lot that we get to, do together. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to be faithful to God in who we're discovering God calls us to be as a community. Our values, the mission statement, vision, all of that. And so we're just grateful. Like we are like the oldest, here by far. And there's just a lot that we feel that we can speak to, a lot that in how we can serve, just being present. But it's an honor. And I will say this on behalf of Sans and I, being called here, and God made it very, very clear, and I'll share that with you guys if you want. Privately, you can ask how we discerned. But FCC, Forest City Church, has been such a blessing to our family. We are so grateful. We arrived here on Launch Sunday, and we had very different expectations, having experienced 3 different church plants prior for their launches, et cetera, being part of teams, et cetera. But the welcome of God here on that day, the life, the joy, it was just a beautiful thing to experience. And so we just started discerning, and come January, after the fall, we had discerned, yes, this is where we wanted. It was really important at that time too that our children felt called by God here as well. Because having moved churches and then been at a different church just for a season to rest and recover and heal, it was really hard for them, right? And so definitely a part, which is why children's ministry, youth ministry, it's so important. And thank you so much to Simone and the team for all that you guys do to bless and serve our children. They are the future. They are the future leaders of the church. They are the next generation. And like, none of this, it's you heard it's the discipleship, the journey of faith, it's a relay race, right? It's a marathon relay race. We have to pass that baton to the next generation. Yeah. Otherwise, we've failed. It's like Hezekiah, right? When God gave him 50 more years, what did he do with those 15 years? He squandered them. And there was going to be all these repercussions, consequences. And he was happy that it wasn't going to happen in his day while he was alive. He would let it fall on the next generation. And that, to me, is the definition of a real kind of failure when it comes to passing the baton.
Yeah, that's great, Chip. I appreciate you speaking into that from your unique perspective and your story here and just what it's meant, not just for you, but your family as a whole. Bella, how have you processed, how have you decided to still show up and be committed and be a part of a church? What was the wrestling for you, and why are you still here? Why are you still here, Bella?
Yeah. I want to steal Riley's like 2-point. I have like 2 standout, reasons why church is so. I mean, there's so many, but the first, I think, like the importance of relationship. I think our culture has lost the importance of relationship and connection and community. And even just like as in my research, as I learn more, the more like science is like backing up just the importance of healthy, safe relationships. And I actually just learned of a study this week. I think his last name is Prophet, if you want to look up the study, but he was doing a study on measuring glucose blood levels, and basically had the participants anticipate having to climb up a hill. And so they were measuring how they perceived the incline of the hill and then how they prepared to climb this hill. And they found that when they told participants they were going to have to do this. And then when they told participants they were going to do this with somebody else, they were 6 times more calm, like literally in their blood levels, more calm and they perceived the incline as less intense. And then too, they also studied like if they just told the participants to imagine climbing this hill with someone, and it was a similar result. And so having like safe people in our life and having community is so important on like a spiritual, emotional, physiological level, that both like biblical principles and science is backing this up. And so I think that's so important. And I think if we neglect that, we're neglecting like a really core part of ourselves. And then that kind of leads me to my second point of like why church specifically is like, I believe that God's design, when the church is healthy, when there's healthy aspects of the church, is lived out in the church. And I see this in, like, we've already talked about diversity, that what other time in our lives are we around people of different ages, of different cultures, different backgrounds, different levels of hurt and trauma in the church. And to be able to come and walk alongside, like I've benefited from people who have gone before me in their faith, and then even just thinking like how we do church is, I think, speaks to God's design of diversity as well. Like even like the worship is like activating our like right right brain, emotional connection to God, and then we do like sermons, which is more like left side. So it's just, I feel like when the church is done well, there's like a holistic aspect to it, which I really appreciate. Yeah, and I just think that we really need to like push into that part in the community. And I think when it hurts, I just wonder, like, what if we did, like, even when it hurts, what if we just came and showed up anyway? And then on the other side of it, like, if you're in the church and someone is showing up hurt, like, what if you came alongside of them? And what if you walked them through this and say, like, I know you have doubts, I know you have pain, but I'm here either way. And just demonstrated that unconditional love that God has for us. And I think the church gives such a beautiful opportunity to do that. In Team Rally, Lucas was sharing today, I'm going to steal some of his words, I don't know where he is, but he talked about how communities, in different aspects, like different communities that we go through in life are for like a specific time in our life or a specific stage. And I just love that church is for all of us, and it's for all people. And yeah, I just never thought about that way. It's true if you like go to school and you're involved in community there, or you are in, I don't know, in a mom's group or whatever it is, right? It's so specific, and yet church is a place where we can just welcome all people, and I would hope that all people of different levels of spiritual maturity, faith, hurt, all these things are there, yeah.
So good, Bella. So appreciate the themes and just the honest wrestle and how you guys wrestle through that. Through like sometimes church can create stereotypes that are unhealthy, or sometimes we neglect next generation, or we still feel hurt but not sure how to like be involved in community. I think we got a few minutes left, and I feel like it'll be helpful to like have some application for today. I have so many questions, but we're running out of time. So I'd love to, like, and Bella, you touched on a little bit there at the end, but I would love to, if you guys could take a moment to talk about your posture with church. Because I think in this room, we have individuals that have been coming for a long time. We have individuals that might be new. We have individuals that come occasionally. And so I just feel like, how do you show up at church? And how do you get the most out of church? And what posture have you found helpful for this community to be beneficial and become a value and formative in your own life? And so, and that might be different for each of you, but like, how do you, like, what posture do you have around church that's created church to be beneficial in your life? Does that question make sense? Riley, you go ahead.
No, that's a really good question.
Just came up with it right now, Riley.
Wow, you're a
this
wise
man. This is the magic
man.
of the panel.
Oh,
the panel.
That's good. That's good stuff. I think I owe that to my parents, to be honest. Chip, I love how you were talking about family ministry and the idea of discipling the next generation, and that's something like I'm so grateful my parents did so well. Like my mom is perfect day, Mother's Day. Shout out, Mom. She is the best pastor I've ever seen. And I think what her and my dad did so well and showed us is that church was one part of their spiritual journey. It was an important part, and it matters. But every morning I would walk upstairs, and my mom was sitting on the couch reading her Bible, and she was praying. And it wasn't a big moment, but it was just so naturally part of her life. And my dad, I would like see him walking, he's just listening to sermons. He's like, Riley, I'm listening to Andy Stanley right now. He's telling me how my finances work with discipleship, and it's great. But it was just like a part of what they did. And so I think as I really entered adulthood, I've wanted to carry that posture, that church is one aspect of my spiritual formation. And when I show up on a Sunday, it works with the time I've spent with the Lord throughout the week. The mornings that I've sat in front of my Bible and prayed and read the Word, the times I've gone for a walk and just allowed the Spirit to speak with me. And sometimes it's not even that, like, it needs to be such a big moment, but I simply am just like, Lord, on this walk, I just want to acknowledge that you are present and you are real. And be with him. And so I think that that would be my application, I guess, the handlebars, some would say, is that church shouldn't be the like crux of your spiritual formation. It should be important, and we should like come seriously and expectant that the Lord is moving in the church, and we should come wanting to worship. And when we don't, we should come and worship anyways, because it's actually not about us at all. But I think that church should be one aspect of the walk.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Bella.
The word that came to mind when you asked that question was authenticity. I hope that I show up to church with authenticity. I hope that I, if I've had a hard week, that I can share that with some people. And I hope to see that in the church as well. I hope to see us come. I think when I've seen church communities that haven't felt as, I don't know the word, but there's like a lack of authenticity sometimes. And I think if we show up like, oh yeah, my relationship with God is perfect, my week has been great, ask a couple people how they are, they say fine, and we move on. Like, I don't know if there's much substance in that, and I don't know if we keep showing up that way, how much fruit is going to come from that. And so I really appreciate like small groups being able to like wrestle with these thoughts and share our own, and of course like vulnerability has to be earned. And so it's not that we are like we want to do these in safe places and safe ways with safe people, but I would love to see us continue to build safe people in each other, and places where people can bring their authentic experience, their questions, their hurts, all of those things, because I think that from what I know of God is He wants us to be real with Him as well, right? And you look like all throughout Scripture, there's like pain, there's sin, there's confusion, there's all these things, and He continues to just come down and meet people where they're at, and with love and with grace. And I would love if we could continue to do that with each other. And so that's my word, authenticity.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
good. Chip, in 1 minute,
Okay.
because we're out of time, 1 minute or less,
All right.
what gives you hope for the church? I'm giving you a different question too.
Okay.
What gives you hope for the church?
Oh, there is
1 minute.
Jesus. Jesus gives
We're done.
me hopes, gives us hope. Done. I would love, talking about embodied, right, and safe spaces, safe people. If the church, we as the church, can learn, Paul speaks so beautifully about the body, how one part of the body honors another. There's no insignificant part, right? If there's one that's weaker, there's a stronger, and we support each other. If we can rejoice, if we can learn as a community to rejoice together, to celebrate each other, to celebrate God's work in each other, if we can learn to suffer well together, I think that's what the world really needs to see. A community who loves each other well enough to know each other and to suffer well together. That is transformative community, right? There's a song that Amos Lee wrote, and there's a lyric, I'm in love with a girl who's in love with the world, but I can't help but follow. Whenever I think of that lyric, I think about the church. The church sometimes is that gal who is so enamored with the world. And then there's this, Jesus still is going to pursue her and love her. And I feel in community, as we embody the hands, the feet, the eyes, the ears, the presence, the face, the smile of Jesus, who would not want to experience that? Who would not want to experience people who are so different, who have different experiences, who look different?
Yeah.
Love them, rejoice with them, and suffer well with them, so that they know they're never alone, because God is always there, and God, we are the hands and feet, and
So
eyes and
good.
ears, and all of that. God,
So
right?
good,
So
Chip.
we're embodied here
Yeah.
in community.
Yeah. Can we express our appreciation to these two families? I'm going to invite you to stand with me this morning. The team's coming.